we've got some wonderful panelists that are going to be speaking, and they're going to give you a clear sense of like what is family-centered coaching, how does family-centered coaching work, and then also just why is family-centered coaching important. And we'll spend most of our time actually with the panelists, so we want to give enough time for question and answer as well, so that you can hopefully dig a little bit deeper into the Q&A. So I'm still experiencing some challenges in moving my my slides, so I'm going to just do a little bit more technical control here. I'll stop sharing that and see if we can get the. I wonder, Devin, if you might be able to pull it up on your end.
Okay, I can certainly do that. So just one moment. Good morning and afternoon to everyone. Just bear with us and we'll get the PowerPoint going.
And while Devin is doing that, I thought what I would do is just give all of you a sense of who we are. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Diana Dollar, the Executive Director at the Prosperity Agenda. And we have had the pleasure of being selected as an organization to bring family-centered coaching out, the training across the country, as well as integrating family-centered coaching into systems across the country. And TPA's work, so the Prosperity Agenda's work, aligns directly with family-centered coaching. We're an organization that designs, tests, and scales solutions for families that are impacted by poverty, particularly to focus on financial wellness and economic opportunity. And it's how we do our work that aligns with family-centered coaching. We absolutely listen to families first. Families who are experiencing poverty drives what we do, and we learn from them as they're experiencing this, as they're experiencing the work that we do, and then we also take what they are, what their insights and their pain points and all of their desires to really build out what we hope to scale and affect more families. So a little bit about also just in terms of our partnership with Kellogg Foundation. We've been having, in the last couple of years in particular, the opportunity to work directly with Paula Salmons at Kellogg Foundation that's committed to bringing family-centered coaching out across the country. And Paula's been the visionary behind FCC. She saw an opportunity to help agencies that are serving families, but again, looking at families in a very holistic fashion, very passionate about the transformation of the work that we all do in the field, and really thinking about how we can actually meet families where they are at, because we know that families' lives are not segmented, and this is something that's very important to Paula and Kellogg Foundation in terms of how we can in the field do much better in terms of how we're again, meeting families where they're at, because they have varied needs all at the same time. So a little bit about also the origins of family-centered coaching. It's the vision and the sentiment of what Paula has really carried forward that lie at the foundation of family-centered coaching. Kellogg's involvement and focus on families acknowledges that the importance, as I have already said, meeting the whole family where they're at. It's out of this vision that came the development of a very practical approach that has been tested in communities across the country, both rural and urban. And why FCC? There are three important reasons why FCC exists today. And many of you are probably involved in family-centered, or excuse me, two-generation initiatives, and it's definitely growing across the country in terms of how two-gen initiatives are being embedded into organizations and into systems. So family-centered coaching has a direct connection to that. Also, there's just a growing interest in better understanding brain science and issues such as trauma-informed, or having approaches that are trauma-informed, also in terms of looking at racial equity and executive function. So this is certainly a lot of these conversations are rising to the surface and are really driving a lot of interest. And lastly, I'll just say that there's growing evidence that coaching is effective. We are seeing a great deal of transformation that happens, and especially case managers, frontline staff that engage in family-centered coaching have expressed an increased satisfaction and a high degree of positive experience related to that relationship that they have with the families that they're serving. So that growing interest in coaching certainly underlies the importance of why FCC at this time as well. So what I'd like to do is now to pass it off to Devin Stubblefield. And before I do that, Devin, I just want to introduce you just a little bit, because I know you and I know how much you have been so dedicated to coaching. But for those of you who don't know Devin, he is someone who has been a practicing coach, working directly with families and individuals who are affected by poverty, and has been a coach educator for over 10 years. And I've had the pleasure of working with you directly, and have seen Devin really transform experiences for staff who go through this training. So Devin, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Diana. I really appreciate that. And it's just a pleasure to be here today with everyone. So I want to say good morning to those of you that are in the West Coast and Central America, and those of you on the East Coast, good afternoon. Again, my name is Devin Stubblefield, and it's just been an incredible experience being a part of the development and the fruition of family-centered coaching. And to me, it really speaks to the evolution of coaching itself. And I remember when coaching first was introduced in the state of Washington through our Asset Building Coalition, and then the growth that it just took on over the years. And I've been very fortunate to partner with Diana and the Prosperity Agenda over those years and really see some tremendous movement. And so today I want to share with you a bit specifically about what exactly is family-centered coaching. So let's just do this. First of all, let's just understand and come together about coaching itself. And coaching is a collaborative partnership that one would have with a participant, a parent, or a family for the purposes of helping them to identify, establish, and to achieve goals. Okay, so that is what coaching is designed to do. And so when we talk about the participant or the parent, from a coaching perspective, they are in control. They are the experts of themselves. And so because of that, coaching says, be in the driver's seat. And so when we talk about family-centered coaching, we're talking about the family, or the person representing the family that's in coaching, will be the one that's front and center, and at the same time bringing their expertise, their knowledge, the information that pertains to the family, and the coach is actually facilitating the process of this engagement. Now, when we talk about family-centered coaching, yes, it does mean that we're talking about the entire family, the whole family, whoever the family is, related or unrelated, doesn't matter. If the participant says that this is family, then it is family. And so what we want to do when we talk about the different execution of family-centered coaching, we have to take into account the different perspectives that the family dynamic brings. And so I'm going to dive a little bit deeper in that. And so when we talk about the whole mindset of coaching, again, in this family context, remember when we first were all introduced to case management. Case management was a very, very powerful integration into a lot of service delivery models, and it works. But the case manager is the driver. And that is one of the major distinctions between that and coaching, where coaching says that we're going to call upon the strengths, the capabilities, the resources of the family, and allow them to lead that focus. And so it's not just us saying, okay, let's get you to this finish line. Now it's about the family identifying what that finish line is and then coaching is supporting that entire process. So it's a little bit different execution than traditional case management. Now, again, when we talk about this whole family concept, we're putting them at the center. Everything that happens through the course of the interaction between coach and the parent is really about the entire family dynamic. And so that means that what we have to do as an organization, we have to fundamentally shift the way we work with them, because it's now putting them, again, in the driver's seat. They are going at the pace and at the speed of their own capability. And we coaches have kind of put on the brakes a little bit, do a little bit of self-managing, and allow the family to kind of roll with this in a manner that best suits them. And so we're gonna look at this shift a little bit deeper, and because I know many of you might be wondering, well, what is this fundamental shift that we have to make in order to do it? Well, the first thing is this. This is what is known as the approach wheel. Now, you'll notice here on the graphic that around the perimeter of the wheel is racial equity. And I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a moment. But what I'm going to do is bring your attention to the center of the wheel. You'll see these three different pie slices here, starting with case management, which we just talked about. And then there is readiness assessment, and then there's goal setting. Each of these three elements are different ways to actually engage with the family or the participant. Now, depending upon what's showing up, that's what's going to determine how the coach is going to respond, either with case management, and I'll give you an example here. So let's say that there is a specific need that the family needs. They're in some sort of crisis or just have an urgent need that needs to be resolved right now. Well, case management is great for that, because that means that that case manager can come in, get it done, get them to the referral services they need, get them the resources, and then it's handled. Okay, that's what case management is. We're making sure that we get them resolved as quickly as possible to resolve that urgency or the crisis. Now, shifting into the next phase, readiness assessment, that is looking at, well, is the family really ready to implement change in their lives? And when we say that, we mean real change, not just thinking about it, but really actually wanting to actually get better at the things that concern them. And so once we've identified that, yes, that they're ready, then we move into goal setting, which is now about looking at what do they want to accomplish and how are they going to get there. And so this approach wheel, notice it says fluidity of approach. What's very unique about family-centered coaching is that very thing, that the coach gets to really go between all three of these engagements, depending upon what's best and what's appropriate for that family. So this is really, really a major distinction from just regular coaching and coaching as we have known it. Now, I said we were going to talk a bit about racial equity, and I want to say this. We know that people from many generations have felt either that things have been well for them or maybe things have not been so well based on their involvement with different organizations or different experiences. And so when we talk about racial equity in the context of family-centered coaching, we want to make sure that we as coaches, we as organizations, that we are actually doing what we can to make sure that whatever the outcome that that family is seeking, that it is not dependent upon race, that the outcome is totally based on other factors, that we're not working with them because of their racial reasons or different characteristics that may have come in their lives. No, we're kind of looking at that and saying, no, we're not looking at it from that perspective. We are trying to work with people in a manner that feels good for them so that they feel like they are getting fair and equitable treatment. And so that is one of the contexts that we want to maintain throughout the entire relationship through family-centered coaching. Because here's the thing, people have different things that are causing them stress in their lives or even trauma. And we're going to spend a little bit of time digging into that, because family-centered coaching also recognizes that there are different factors that might be going on that could totally impact their ability to move forward. And so as coaches, we have to consider these things. And so notice we're talking about trauma-informed care now. So yes, people experience trauma. Those are those external things that happen that causes discomfort, and it could be from a number of different sources where that trauma is coming from. But what we want to make sure from a family-centered perspective is when they are in our environment, our offices, our agencies, we want to make sure that these 5 principles here, that we do our best to make sure these things is what they feel. First one being safety, making sure that the atmosphere is calm, supportive, comfortable, that they can really come in and kind of breathe a little bit. Then choice. We want to make sure that we always maintain them in a position of choice. They get to choose. They choose even how the coach engages with them. And then we move into empowerment, making sure that we're noticing the strengths and all the things that make them well. We want to notice those things and we want to call them out and help them to recognize that they can use those things to leverage into a better day. Then collaboration, making sure that we don't make them feel like they're alone. No, we want to make them feel like this is all inclusive. We're in this together. Again, really, really, really a dynamic of coaching, that partnership, that collaboration. But we want to make sure that the family understands that they're not in it alone, but we can make decisions together. Then trustworthiness. That's really important, because people feel that organizations maybe sometimes don't have their best interest in mind just because of systemic things. But here's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we as coaches and organizations provide clear and consistent information. And so if we do all 5 of these things, then what we've done is that we have responded appropriately in a trauma-based scenario. And so this is what trauma-informed care is all about. And in the toolkit, it goes a little bit deeper on some of the other things that you can consider around this, but this is so, so crucial to the relationship. Now, we're talking about executive skills. Now, these are these 12 cognitive abilities that we all have to different degrees, but here's what happens. From about 6 months old all the way through our 20s, we are developing our executive skills. And depending upon our circumstances, our life, our scenarios, and things that we go through, some of these skills build up stronger than others. And the ones that don't get built up sometimes could be very, very weak. And so taking that into consideration, especially when it comes down to action planning, when we're talking about goal setting and doing all the things that needs to happen in order for them to achieve the goal, we have to take into consideration that there could be some diminished executive skills functions that might be really prevalent in their lives. And so to give you a context of how we organize this, it's organized into these 3 different areas. One, how we organize and plan things. So when you're talking with someone, if you're noticing that they're having a bit of trouble with even maybe keep being on time to your appointments, or they have trouble planning or sticking to certain priorities, then we could fathom that they probably have some diminishment of executive function in those areas. And then we go about number 2, looking at how they react to things. And now in terms of this, the prosperity agenda, we looked at metacognition specifically, and that is the ability to see the big picture. What we've noticed based on the research is that sometimes people are unable to navigate a problem that happens later on down the road. So for example, if a person sets a goal to go back to school, get a degree, and so they can be more employable, well, what happens is something comes up that hinders that, and they now are stuck. If they don't have a plan to kind of adjust themselves, then they could fall back and not really continue with that process and lose momentum and maybe quit altogether. And so one of the things that we want to do is help people to understand how to react to things, especially when they don't go the way that it's intended. And so that's one of the areas that we looked at the prosperity agenda. Now, obviously, there are other things here, as you see: response inhibition, flexibility, emotional control. All these things really contribute to a person's reaction to their external stimulus, and to really help them to either decide to keep going, or they might decide that they want to stop. Then the third area is how we get things done. Now, this is really important as well, because let's take the first one, task initiation. Just imagine a 3-year-old who is learning how to pick up their toys and put it back into the toy box. Well, what happens is, if that child has a challenge with understanding how to do that without getting frustrated and irritable, then if that behavior isn't really helped over time, that one thing, that task initiation, could be diminished years into the future. And so when it comes down to starting things that might move them ahead in terms of their own self-sufficiency, they might have challenges with just getting things started. And so that's just an example of one way that these diminished skills can affect even in adulthood. Now, also sustained attention, goal-directed persistence, and working memory. These are all things that really kind of help or even hinder the ability to actually get things done. And so from a family-centered context, we're saying, as a coach, you have to recognize if these things are showing up and then respond accordingly. Now, the other element is this thing called scarcity, and this is behavioral economics. And I want to say this, and I want you to take a look at those suitcases, because I'm going to give you an analogy here. And here it is. If you have a larger suitcase when you're packing for a trip, you can put lots of things in there, even some non-essential things. And packing the suitcase is a breeze because it's got enough room. Versus if you have a smaller suitcase, now you have to determine, okay, what's going to go in there, what's important. And so a person has to kind of predict what they need, and then predict accurately, because if something goes wrong and they didn't put that thing that they didn't really expect to need, if they don't have it, then on their trip, they're going to be a little uncomfortable. And so this whole analogy is, there are people that has chronic things going on in their lives that create scarcity, which means that there is not a lot of slack. In other words, there's not enough to go around. Everyday decisions are tough. And then it's really kind of exponentially exasperated when something happens that they can't control, and they're already feeling scarcity. Now, all of a sudden, another emergency happens. It really creates a very uncomfortable situation. So we say scarcity puts people in a double bind. Everyday tasks are more costly, and at the same time, the consequences of mistakes or misfortunes are more severe because families have no cushion to fall back on. And this is really getting into the behavioral aspect. People are making decisions based on slack, based on the lack of slack, based on this scarcity position that they find themselves in. And so between this scarcity and behavioral economics, trauma-informed care, and executive function skills, those three elements really is informing how we should be responding as a coach to the family. And so in the Family-Centered Coaching Toolkit, there are many different resources and things that really can help us understand these dynamics better and to really help with the engagement of the families. Now, to put it all together, when we talk about doing this, there are these 6 steps that is at the heartbeat of family-centered coaching. And as you notice here, starting with step 1, it says prepare for the meeting. What we're talking about there is helping the coach to get ready to coach, to make sure that the coach is in the right mindset and is really being their best self for the family or the parent or whoever's showing up in the meeting. Step 2 is getting into building that relationship and understanding, well, who actually is in the family? Who is making up this dynamic of this whole situation? Whoever that might be, doesn't matter. We're saying, all right, let's make room for this. Let's make room for this discussion. And then once that is established, we understand who the family is. Now we can do a little bit more focusing. So that's where we're going to step 3. Step 3, use the wheel of life. Now, I know many of you as coaches are used to the wheel of life tool that is in many, many different coaching applications. It's here as well. And there are 7 domains around that particular wheel. And obviously it gets into finances, legal, family, relationship, health, all the major domains that would really affect the family, and allowing that family and that parent to identify how they feel about that on that particular day. And then going into step 4, we get into the stages of change, understanding what those stages are, and then what role we're going to play to really help that family move forward. Now, stages of change, there are 5 different stages of change, and this toolkit goes into that in more depth, but really it's about helping that person to get to a place where they're in action. In other words, they've moved beyond just thinking about it, and they're out now are saying, I want to do something, and they actually start doing it. But there are certain things and elements that comes up in life that might deter that. So there could be a relapse. In other words, one day they might feel really good about doing things and they might start taking action, but then 2 weeks later something happens and they decide they're not doing it anymore, or then maybe they feel like they can't. And so one of the things that we want to do during step 4 is to assess where they are and to help them to identify if they are in a lower stage of change, to figure out, well, what's preventing them from moving forward in that change and helping them to overcome those barriers. And so that's step 4. But then going into step 5, once we are in action, now we're into the planning, we're doing, and then there is the review process. Actually, a tool that is used to do that, to actually have them to look at what they plan, look at the steps that is needed to achieve their goal, and then to review what's actually happening as they're implementing it. And so that's a very powerful one. And then coming into step 6, it goes into support and accountability, making sure that we are maintaining that collaborative engagement with them, letting them know that we're still there with them, even though they're leading the charge, but we are certainly supporting them, not only the coach, but also the organization. And so these are the 6 steps of the family-centered coaching process. Now, you might be thinking that that's kind of cool, and it certainly does benefit the families. This shift, this fundamental way of working with the whole dynamic of everybody that is pertaining to their family. That's great for them because it really allows all of the different elements to come into play. And even though it could be that you have family members within the same household that have different goals, and maybe this whole coaching relationship can help those other family members when in the absence of this engagement would not have ever happened. And so that's a great benefit for the families. Now, let's also talk about benefits for the staff. There are really lots of benefits, I think, that coaching brings to the staff, because a lot of the work is actually transferred to the participant or the parent, and they're actually getting things done. They're leading the charge, where the staff is actually supporting. And what happens is coaches regain bandwidth as the families begin to take more control of their scenarios and to move themselves forward. And so coaching helps coaches too. And so what we want to do now is let's open it up a little bit. We have a very special guest from the Sunrise County Academic Council, Marsha Sloan. He is the actual Family Futures Down East director, and she's going to come on right now with us, and she's going to actually tell us a little bit about what she's experienced and what some of the coaches that she's been working with has done with family-centered coaching. So, okay, Marsha, are you with us? Oh, Marsha, sounds like we've got an audio problem. We can't really hear you.
I wonder if we can try to take some questions until we actually work out the audio issue. So do you feel comfortable doing that, Devin?
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay.
That's no problem at all. Okay.
So there's a question that, and I'm just going to read it to you so that it
Okay. Yeah.
something. So I have not been trained in motivational interviewing or trauma-informed care. How will that impact my ability to use the fluidity of approach?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. And I can say this. We realize that different organizations have different levels of training around these particular engagements. But here's the great thing about the toolkit. The toolkit has lots of resources that has been identified, and there's links to those resources in the toolkit that will basically give you a working knowledge of those other disciplines. Now, here's the great thing about it. One of the resources, especially for motivational interviewing, actually points you to like a pocket portable guide that tells you, well, this is how you have a conversation for motivational interviewing. So you can pretty much see exactly how to do it. And in addition to that, again, the content that's in the toolkit and the resources provided really will give you a really good knowledge of what it is. Same thing with the trauma-informed care. There's lots of resources around that. And so I wouldn't say that not having training in either of those disciplines is going to hinder. It just means that just do a little bit of research into the information that's in the toolkit, and that will cover some of your questions that you may have around those topics.
Great.
Yes.
We're still trying to figure out what the challenge might be in terms of Marcia's audio. So Marcia, if you hold on, we'll still try to see if we can figure it out, and we'll have Devin answer another question that came up. This is from Shanice, and it says, what tools do you use to assess readiness? Which I can answer that one, but the next one after that is also, how do you talk about cultural and diversity when training coaches? How does that play in the approach?
You want to answer your part of the question first?
Sure, I'll answer the assessment.
Okay.
So in the toolkit, thank you, Devin. In the toolkit, there is an assessment form that we're encouraging folks. I was going to touch on this at the end as well, that we would really love for you to use within your entire organization, so you can see how, not just within the frontline staff, but also throughout the organization, whether your organization is actually ready to take on family-centered coaching. So there's that tool that's in the toolkit itself. So I'm going to pass that second part of the question to you then.
Okay, great. Can you repeat that second question?
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you talk about cultural and diversity? I would say culture and diversity when training coaches. How does that play in the approach?
Yes, well, I really do believe that first of all, that's a great question. And as a coaching trainer, one of the things that I think is really important is to really understand who your participants are. And one exercise that we started doing as an organization is we started creating personas and really identifying, who the people are that is being served, being coached, what their characteristics are, and how can we as staff, how can we adjust as coaches, how can we adjust our approach to be sensitive to any dynamics or characteristics that might be prevalent in the relationship of the people coming into our agencies. And so I just think it really requires having a very open, candid conversation with your coaches during the training and just putting everything on the table, because really at the end of the day, you want the participants to really feel that there was a value add here. Okay. And again, getting back to this whole thing around racial equity, we want to make sure that our engagement is free of our own implicit biases. So that's another thing that you could do in your coaching training, is to really help people to see, well, what are my own biases? And as a matter of fact, in the toolkit, there are some resources that you can point to help your coaches to really get this really understood, so that we look at the individual aspect of that. Then there's also organizational biases. And then the bottom line is that if you kind of do both, the organizational and the individual, and I think that could really help coaches to move forward. And then the final piece is the systemic racism or systemic biases that happens, and there's some information and resources there. So I would say during your coaching training, point your coaches to these resources, have a discussion about it, take the self-assessments, the organizational assessment as well, and then make some decisions on how you're going to engage after that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Devin. It looks like we got Marcia. Welcome, Marcia.
Thank you so much.
You were persistent. We appreciate that. We did get a question about Marcia. Where are you from? So, Devin, did you want to introduce Marcia?
Yes. Marcia, first of all, Marcia, thank you for being here. And Marcia has some very, very great experience with, she manages coaches. So she's got a team of coaches that have already started with family-centered coaching, and she's here today to really share some things with us. So Marcia, welcome. We're glad that you were able to get on through the technical challenges.
Thank you. So we use family-centered coaching here we're in Machias, Maine. So that's the far down east part of Maine, and it's where your day begins. We were very fortunate to be part of the group of coaches that Kellogg worked with really early on to introduce some of these tools. So our coaches have been working with these tools for several years now.
Awesome. So Marcia, first of all, I'm just thrilled about what you guys are doing, and I'm just so thankful that we have an opportunity to get you on today. And as I've researched into your organization and had some conversations, we found that you all use a cohort model and in your work with families. And we want to know is, how does that work in conjunction with the family-centered approach, and how you've used that, and what are the benefits of that?
So we use a cohort model. Our families are all enrolled in post-secondary education on a college campus, and their children are also co-enrolled in an early education program on the campus at the same time. And so the cohort model has been really great for both our families and our coach to just build that peer support using those tools, and to it really reinforces what the coach is working one-on-one with the families about. Oftentimes we'll find a coach is talking about a certain goal with a family, and it may be a challenge, it may be a referral to an organization that they've not had success with in the past, and oftentimes another parent will say, that really worked for me, or it wasn't so bad, or this is what I tried. It also has taken the burden off of our coaches, because a lot of times our families are problem solving outside of our family center with each other using social media. And because we're in a pretty rural part of the country, a lot of our families and a lot of our parents had felt really isolated prior to entering our program. And so it really is building those peer support networks for them that will go on long after we're done with the coaching component.
That is so huge. The relationships that are formed through those cohorts, and just the dynamic of that they've got another family that they can talk to and lean on, and that sort of thing, that goes way beyond what the coach can do. So I am so glad that you guys are doing that, and thank you for sharing that. But I certainly see the power in the cohort model. So thank you. Now, in terms of your coaches, now that you guys have been doing this, there are obviously several tools in the toolkit. So which ones resonate the most with the families in your program?
So I think the one tool that really has been important for us is the Who's in Your Family tool. And we use that a lot with our families. We've also adapted it, and that's the nice thing about this toolkit is you can really take tools and work with them to make them fit your program. So not only did we take the Who's in Your Family, we're a program that has 7 collaborative partners. So there's 7 agencies our families are moving in and out of. And so we did a Who's in Your Family for the partnership so that with the parent still here, I'll show you my little diagram. So the parent is still in the middle, but these are our partner agencies and these are the services. So we give this to the parents right when they start their program so they can figure out that they're in the center of our program and there's all these supports around them. And then they would do the Who's in the Family tool with them. We also use the Hopes and Dreams tool, and again, we adapted it. Our program works over a 2-year period. So we ask them to think about their aspirational goals for their family in a 1-year and a 2-year and in a kind of long-term success, because a lot of them go into a 4-year degree program and will, and really getting them to think outside of just that immediate crisis or immediate need, but thinking aspirationally for their family. The other tool, we did take the Who's in My Family tool, and we took some of the questions that are in the toolkit that you can also use with participants about what are you going to do in this circumstance, or who can you go to help for that before they're in a crisis. And so our questions actually say, if my car breaks down, I will call. And we have a line to fill in the name and to put a phone number. And it might be it's Uncle Joe, and it might be that it's a program that supports transportation, or if they're receiving TANF benefits, they might go to their TANF worker. But we put the name and the number so that when they're in that crisis situation and we know those executive functioning skills kind of break down, then that it's there, it's on paper, they've already thought about those. So those are the tools we really kind of latched onto for our program.
Wow, Marsha, that is amazing. And I want to say this to everyone here on this webinar. That is a great example of taking the toolkit and adapting it for your work environment. You can do that. This is exactly what is intended, because the tools are yours to flex with, and however you believe it's going to work, do it. Because we want the tools to be used, and we want to make them work for the families that you're serving. So Marsha, thank you for sharing that. So again, everyone, know that you can tweak the tools, okay? Definitely tweak them to work for your families. Now, Marsha, since you guys have been doing this for a while, I want to talk about what are some discoveries that you've observed with your coaches as they begin to integrate family-centered coaching approach into their environment at work. How has it been at work for your coaches?
I think it's been really great. One of my coaches recently said that she could never imagine going back to a case management system. Most of our coaches have come up through services where they've had more either a case management, pure case management, or pure goal setting program. And just to be able to move between those to really meet families at where they're at that moment in time has been really great. And I just want to say, you put up the wheel, and while it is like really a third of their time in each of the areas, there's a fluidity to coaching that moves quickly from one. You may think that a student's coming in to go over their schedule for the next semester, but there's a crisis at home with their kiddo, and they can't sit down and do goal setting right then and there. And you really have to move into some of those other pieces of coaching, and to be able to, on the fly, just move between the tools and not feel like you have to tick off all the boxes has been really important to our coaches, and has really empowered them to build relationships with the families that really result in trust, and help families move forward. So I think that's really been the biggest change we've seen with our staff.
That is amazing, and that is so important. I mean, even for the coaches to be able to make adjustments in that meeting, like you said, meet that family where they are, and to let's talk about this thing going on at home. Do that for however long it takes, and then we can get back into what they came. That is awesome because in normal coaching environments, that might not be able to occur.
Right.
So thank you for sharing that. We really appreciate you for coming on and to just sharing what you guys have been experiencing. So, okay, Diana, I think at this point in time, we can open it up for the entire group here to send their questions.
Definitely. And I want to encourage you guys who are listening and watching to definitely continue to add your questions. There's one from Beth Sharber that it's to all panelists, and it says, we have a program that uses master's level clinicians to provide services receiving TANF benefits. They are trained in trauma-informed care, but this program seems to be using bachelor level staff. Can you talk more about what level of ability and education is needed for this model? And does this require coaches to do home visits? Well, let's take does it require, at what level of education? Let's go there first.
So our program does require bachelor's level, but we do have, as part of our model, those 7 partners that I talked about. We do have master's level clinicians who provide clinical case consultation to our coaches, and then meet with me regularly to look at trends that also inform our overall program in terms of family needs. So we do have those master's level clinicians involved in the program. They're just not at the coach level, but our coaches meet with them weekly.
Devin, how would you respond to that? Because I know that you've worked with, trained many different case management staff. So how would you respond to Beth?
Yeah, well, if you have staff within your organizations that are at this higher level of education and execution, then I believe that should be part of the process. You certainly want to make the referral, hand off the family to that person or individual. That's actually spelled out in the toolkit where organizations can determine what's going to be the best execution for them to flow within the fluidity of approach based on the capacity of the staff that's available. So certainly feel free to do that, because the model just says that these elements exist. We just have to find the best and appropriate way to engage people with their challenges that come with these different levels. And so I would say that that's an organizational decision, but certainly if you do have people on staff that are better equipped, then make that referral over there. And then, but you make it all collaborative so that the family knows that this is part of the process. One of the things we want to be careful of is people sometimes feel that if they go from one person to the next, that there's a drop off. And so to the extent that you could really create that collaborative feeling within the organization that this is part of the process and not a hard stop for the initial person that engaged them, then I think it's going to really work with them.
And I think what I'm hearing you say too, Devin, that it's really about the relationship between the two, between the staff person and the family member, as opposed to what roles we're playing specifically.
Yes.
So it's really that, again,
Yes.
That's on the relationship. That's great. The second part of the question, just to get completed, is does this family-centered coaching model require coaches to do home visits?
So our program, sorry, our program does have home visits as part of it, but sometimes our parents aren't ready to have someone come and visit in the home, and so oftentimes we do those visits in our family center or on campus, or even in the Dunkin' Donuts sometimes, especially when they're just building that relationship, and then encourage them to have those home visits when we can.
Great. Devin, did you want to respond to that at all?
Yeah, it's based on the organization and what your capacity is. You know, we've trained organizations that do all of the above. So some do home visits, others don't. It's just based on what your service delivery model is. Because I believe that the execution of this is valuable. Because as Marsha said, if the family's not ready for you to come into their home environment, then that's okay. So
Yeah.
so it just depends on the family and of course your capacity.
Well, and I would also say that there's so many different programs that are using family-centered coaching. So obviously home visits aren't a part of every service offered. So, and what we've been hearing is that there is adaptability with FCC to a variety of different types of programs. So definitely does not require coaches to do home visits with this approach. Great. Michelle Richards, also Go Maine. So wonderful, Marsha. You got a fan out there. But she's asking, she works for TRIO Upward Bound with students who are economically disadvantaged and first generation. The students are more at the center of the program, but how do they engage families more with the students being the primary focus? So our students are more successful when their families are involved. So it seems like Michelle's wanting to figure out, is FCC a tool to help engage families more when the focus is on the students? How would you both respond to that? Marsha, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. I think that, you know, a big piece of families know when they're coming into our program that it's a family program, and we do have a component for children. I think, you know, with TRIO, one of the things that, because we work with a lot of TRIO folks on our campuses, one of the things we do is sometimes you can't have a meeting in your office with their children if they need to bring their children, really asking questions about childcare, child needs, making sure that's not a barrier for the educational opportunities that TRIO provides. And so a lot of times the TRIO workers on our campus will actually come and meet in our space on campus because it's set up for children. And there's a space for the children to play while they're there. So I think just thinking about what your environment is, what your ability to have children be part of your program is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Devin, any
Yeah.
thing to add?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, to what Marsha's saying, that, you know, sometimes engaging the parents about their child and their child's goals is part of the process. Because here's the thing, parents are making decisions based on the entire dynamic, and it's like everything affects everything inside the house. And so to the extent that it's appropriate and the parent is willing to do that, then I would say encourage that dialogue to move into that direction where we're looking at, you know, what are the needs of the children? What are the needs right now that's really going to impact the dynamic of the household in the short term and in the long term? Because what happens is some families just might not even realize that this engagement is really supportive of that. They may initially come in thinking, well, this is just about this or just about that. But I think that you can really make it more broad, because that's what family-centered coaching is about. It's that expansive view. So to the extent that you could do that with the family, if they're ready for that, I think go ahead and do it and give them that opportunity.
That's great.
Yeah.
We have just a few minutes. We're actually at 5 minutes right now. I wanted to squeeze one more question in, and I will ask both of you to respond if you can pretty quickly. So a lot of families that are coming in during a personal crisis. How would family-centered coaching work as an effective intervention for that? So thinking about at the crisis moment.
So I think that, you know, the staff is definitely trained to handle those crisis moments, but it's really building that relationship so that you can look at the more aspirational goals, so that you can make a plan, checking in, making sure that the families know you're going to check in, that we're going to continue to work on this once the crisis is resolved. But again, the nice thing with family-centered coaching is when it's a crisis time, really jumping in there and then working through the other steps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, because you have to think about, if a person's in crisis, then their focus is on that thing. And so other types of engagement might not be effective at that moment. And so that's why, again, going back to the fluidity of approach, going into that case management type of mode where you're taking control of the scenario and really helping bring more bandwidth back to the family in that moment, so that they can get that resolved, breathe a little bit, and then now move into other areas. So I think that that's very critical to really keep in mind. And that was the whole purpose of having this three-way approach, is to really move into whichever engagement is right for that particular day in those circumstances.
That's great. Thanks, both of you. Before I ask you, Devin, to pull up that last slide, is there anything else, Marcia, that you would want to share, just in terms of your experience in working with FCC?
I think that and each organization will be different, but really having some of those core values around trauma-informed, for us it's trauma-informed care, and poverty-informed work, the racial equity, we call it cultural competency for our population, but just grounding your program in those core values has just really been critical for our work and our work with our collaborative partners.
Seems like that's an opportunity for us going forward to really dig a lot more into, and we're excited to actually be doing that. So I guess stay tuned more on that. Well, again, thanks, Marcia. Appreciate you spending time with us. I'm glad we worked out all the technical difficulties to get you here. Devin, do you want to pull up that last slide, and
Yes.
We'll just talk about a little bit about some next steps. So,
All right.
Thank you, Devin. So here's what we want to encourage all of you to do. So if you go to the FamilyCenteredCoaching.org website, I mentioned that at the beginning, you'll be able to download all the tools that have been referenced here. And in particular, we're eager to have those of you who are curious about whether or not FCC fits in your organization, take the assessment. That tool is there to give you an opportunity to explore where your organization is at in terms of its readiness to bring FCC in. And I would also just say that even if it looks like FCC might be a stretch, let us know, contact us, because while the training may not be your next step that you think, we could certainly work through some of those readiness issues with you, so that when you are ready for training, we can either do that for you, or we can actually connect you to one of our network partners that will also be providing training across the country. So those are important next steps that we want to encourage you to do. And Devin is an absolute fantastic resource. And so obviously now, Marcia, I hope you don't mind if people want to reach out to you. We'll make that information available. So, and I do want to just spend a moment to thank Devin for the time that you have put in, not just today, but just in general in terms of the contribution that you have been making to coaching and to family-centered coaching. You've been an amazing champion, and on many respects in terms of bringing this work to individual staff as well as families and people who are just affected by poverty. So thank you so much for being with us today. If we didn't get to your questions, we are going to try to make that information available through either through our newsletter or go onto our website. We'll send you an email along with the recording that you can tap. So that'll be made available to you. I think that's about it. So we are done for today. Thank you guys so much, all of you, and appreciate you joining us. And we hope to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Diana. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.